Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third webinar in the Specright Unpacked series, Empowering Your Data Strategy. We will uncover how owning your own data allows you to have an advantage over competitors, ensures regulatory compliance, and above all, allows you to see trends so you can understand your target market better. My name is Grace Sneed. I am a sales development representative here at Specright. I spend my days reaching out to companies in an effort to educate them on the value of specification data management. Prior to working at Specright, I worked as a packaging engineer for 2 CPG companies, giving me a unique perspective on the importance of data management. Alongside me today is Adam Peak. Adam is the host of People of Packaging podcast and Senior Vice President of Sales at Myers Printing. His passion for changing the world has also led him to be a sustainability consultant, sales trainer, global keynote speaker, and author of the Packaging Peaks children's book. I'm also joined by Danielle Goad. Danielle is the manager of Specright Network, Specright's supply chain collaboration marketplace. Danielle has held roles across multiple departments at Specright, including implementation, product, and partnerships, where she looks to leverage her degree of industrial technology and packaging. Thank you so much both for being here.
Hooray!
Now, the first chunk of today's webinar will be spent tapping into Adam and Danielle's knowledge about the importance of owning your own data. Danielle will then go into a demo showcasing Specright's supplier collaboration module and Specright Network. And then to wrap up, we will have a live Q&A session. So please jot down your questions or feel free to submit them in the chat as we go. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So our first question today: in what ways does owning data empower a brand or company to make better strategic decisions?
Who gets to go first?
Yeah.
Whoever.
I can take this one to start, Adam, but I think we'll probably dive into, the concept of owning your own data and how this empowers companies throughout the webinar. But really, I think it empowers a brand to have them get a baseline to innovate from. I think once you have that access and control over your data, you can start to make those strategic decisions around, sustainability metrics, cost savings, waste, and really kind of letting your R&D teams actually calculate, the changes and impact that you're making.
Yeah, I will have a less formal answer. I don't know, but it's fascinating to me being on the packaging side in terms of like making packaging and being a supplier, and how few people actually don't own it. And then they'll say things like, we want to increase, our post-consumer waste by 40%. I'm like, what is it currently? We're not sure. Well, then how do you know? how are you going to increase that? So from like my background is actually I'm a pastor. That was before I got into packaging, and part of that was like understanding how to interpret and apply and like create sermons, which is a process that was called biblical exegesis. And the very first thing of that is the same thing that I talk about with people about their data, which is you have to start with what is objectively true. If you don't understand what is something that is verifiably and objectively true, then your foundation is going to be weak. And that's where all the greenwashing comes in. That's where, you're overpaying for stuff and errors happen. It's like, get all the way down to what can you observe is true. And that's where I think a lot of brands are missing it, because they hope stuff is true. They don't know stuff is true. And so being able to have a complete grasp around your data. Are we calling it data or data? I want to be consistent here. I don't know.
Interchangeable.
Okay, we're on different time zones, and I'll probably use the same. I think I've used data and data. I don't really have a consistent.
I think it depends on the sentence.
Yeah, so if you want to know like how much recycled content is in our aluminum, then the data.
Then the data.
Yeah. I don't know how that works, but you get the point, right? Like you have to have an objective truth to jump from, if you're going to make comparisons around cost, around materials, around lightweighting, around LCA, like any of it, if you don't know it and if you don't control it, like I said I sent out a little promo, like you're in trouble. You're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And Specright is such a one-stop shop solution. You're talking about having a source of truth to be able to reference, and just like the granular detail and having that information allows you to see, do I have 40% PCR, or do I have X amount of components in my portfolio? So yeah, that's exactly what Specright aims to help with. Next question. What are some potential risks or downsides for brands that do not prioritize data ownership?
It's pronounced data.
Oh, data. Sorry.
No. I'll jump in first here. The risks are increasing. Oh, look at that. We got the question right down there. The risks are increasing every week in terms of looking at EPR legislation. So I was able to help co-author an ebook. Shout out to the team at Myers around EPR legislation that's happening. And even in the ebook, I mentioned companies like Specright, like Lorax, like Trayac, who are all kind of coming together to help create an ecosystem around data. Now it's going to be in my brain. I'm going to be thinking about how I'm saying the word. But the risks are increasing as legislation continues to become more and more normalized around what can you say, the FTC green guides, and then also how much will you have to pay. That was a rhyme. That was a free rhyme for everybody. What can you say and how much do you have to pay when it comes to EPR taxes? So what do you owe if you are in France or in the UK with the UK plastics tax, or if you are in Nigeria, which has its own EPR, or if you're in Colorado? Understanding all of that, if you don't have it, there are very real financial risks, and there's also very real market risks around making claims that are either misleading or inaccurate. And who did a great job of articulating this was Kevin Davis from Dermalogica. I'm sure he's got some content on Specright, but he spoke at I think it was at a Spec Summit about just the importance of collecting and owning their data to report out, because they didn't know what they were doing, right? So not doing that is it's risky to your employees, because it's people don't like to just manually track down data all the time. If you're a degreed packaging engineer like Grace is, right? Like, you want to spend your time making cool stuff. You don't want to be finding data all the time. So it's a risk for your employees, it's a risk financially, and then it's also a risk for your brand. Those would be my three things.
Yeah, I think I have one to add, but I agree. I loved Kevin's from Dermalogica's talk at Summit. I think he really hit on the importance of data. I know he emphasized needing the data, and specifically like the sustainability data, to be able to do the reporting for retailers, which then helped with like brand placement in shelves, for example. So this all leads, kind of downstream as well. I think one risk that is sometimes also overlooked is like the ability to standardize. I feel like companies continue to, when they don't have searchable data, to like reinvent the wheel every single time they need a package for a new product. And so just having like the visibility into what you've already done also allows for, again, employees to work on like new innovative materials, or finding new suppliers, or other ways to kind of improve your package than just, I have to recreate a whole nother one for this new product that's launching. I think that also goes for just like the idea of standardizing when you can, whether that's, again, like we do packaging materials and packaging data, but also around ingredients for formulations, or just suppliers like within your ecosystem as well. Kind of having a full scope of all of your data can kind of like paint that larger picture for you.
And also with that standardization piece, that also That's mitigating risk, so much risk, eliminating human error if you can just go in and see what you already have and kind of duplicate it, standardize that.
Can I tell a quick story about that? Because I like stories. I mentioned we'd have story time with Adam. I'll keep it super fast. But I worked for a company that printed shrink sleeves, and we had a customer that was buying shrink sleeves from us, and they had various. It was one size on this, and they had various different, sort of like versions of the one size. And so they made a change to the materials from a clear to a white. It was like a blackout material. So it was a white shrink sleeve material. And we ran some trials and it all worked and it looked really beautiful. And we printed it for them. Then we got an order after that for the other versions. Well, none of their specs were updated at all. And so the purchase order came over for clear. It was $47,000 worth of clear shrink sleeve material. That's what came over. But the artwork was updated to be on the white. And so it printed, shipped in, and they're like, this is a disaster. This all looks horrible. What happened? Like, you guys screwed up. It's all on you, right? Like as a vendor. And we dug into it and it was like, yeah, I mean, I guess somebody could have asked the question, hey, do you want to transfer this over? But at the end of the day, as a brand, you are responsible for the proofs you sign off, for having the right material specs. And that was like, and they ended up having to pay for a whole other run, right? Like they almost missed their launch date. So you're talking about, quality, time to market. And then it gets just that financial, right? Like now they had to pay $90-something thousand for what could have cost them $40,000. And I don't know how much Specright is because I'm not an employee there, but there's a lot of those instances, right? Where like,
yeah, absolutely. Something like that, your Specright is paid for years. That ROI that you see on it is amazing.
Yeah.
Things that it will catch.
Yep. So that's the other risk that's inherent right now, not just in the future, but like right now, you are at risk for somebody sending over an order that is wrong because all of your data has to be updated manually internally, or you're relying on your vendors to make sure that they are updating it. And there's a lot of potential problems for errors. Danielle Kahneman has a great book, and it's all about noise in the process, right? Like owning your data removes a lot of this noise from the process to make it just boring. We just want packaging to be boring. Order your stuff and it shows up on time and everyone's happy. That's what everybody wants.
Yeah. I know you guys touched on the EPR taxation and stuff that's coming. So how does data ownership tie into sustainability efforts within the packaging sector?
I think this kind of goes back to the first answer as well, as like you need the foundation, right? You need your starting place. I know a lot of companies, have made the 2025, 2030 goals where, they are trying to track improvements. It's going back to Adam's first story, and Adam's story time is like where, what was your starting place? So you understand like what that change is. It's doing the, benchmarking and the year-over-year reporting as well as being able to, tie into the other systems and partners that we have like Triac and Lorax for EPR and LCA reporting, I think.
Yeah, I mean the EPR stuff is a really, really, really big deal. And I'm still surprised at how few brands actually know about it. Because I think if they did, they would be scrambling to grab a hold of their data. I've heard Matthew Wright say numerous times, like at Specright, we don't define what sustainability is. We just empower companies, right? Like that's the whole point of like using what is this thing called? Empowering your data strategy, right? Like, how can you empower what you have defined as sustainability within the confines of, the legislation and stuff like that we're talking about? But how do you define that? And then the data will help you get to hitting your goals and at least give an understanding of how you're tracking towards those goals. Without that, you're lost. And so it's not only critical. I think that data ownership to me is imperative for sustainability efforts. I don't actually know how we get there without the data. everyone's just guessing, which
Yeah.
doesn't seem like a pretty good. That doesn't seem like a good strategy to, like, save the planet.
I don't think
Regulations especially are involved. That is, guessing is not going to do it.
guessing is not a strategy is the tagline there.
Yeah, but I mean, think about this: would you just guess on your tax filings?
Right.
Like, I don't know. I think we made $1 million this year. But what if you only made 100,000 and you got to pay, what you got to pay $300,000 in taxes?
Right.
Now you've lost $200,000. Like, you don't just guess at that, and that is essentially what EPR legislation is going to do. Like, you cannot guess as to how much single-use plastic you used. You cannot guess on that. If you're gonna have to report it.
Yeah. Are there specific industries or sectors where data ownership is particularly critical?
I think the short answer is everyone. I think, data is critical to everyone. I think there are more heavily regulated maybe industries that I've worked with in the past where, but I think every industry has a version of that, whether it's food and beverage, and there's FDA, or you're looking at biotech and med devices, right? Like everyone kind of has their own legislation and piece that they're going to report to for making data ownership critical. I think also, markets are just heavily competitive, right? Again, if you don't have the data to innovate, I think that's where, again, you fall behind.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like a bit like a cop out, right? Like, yeah, it's all of them. I'm sure there's some that are more so than others. You think about a medical device that's going to go into somebody's body. That's going to be a pretty, you want to have everything. Like, I want to know that industry is very well regulated as somebody who may have to have that, right? So I don't know, but at the end of the day, if data is empowering financial success, if data is empowering sustainability success, and if data is empowering good quality, amongst other things, is there an industry that does not want to have good quality, financially successful businesses that are also sustainable? I mean, I can't think of a single industry that's like, we really love unsustainable companies that lose money. And there's like VC firms that are like, we give them billions of dollars. They just lose money and they destroy the planet. Like, nobody's ever going to say that. So yeah, at the end of because of what data empowers and data ownership empowers, those things touch every industry and sector for sure.
Yeah. How does data ownership intersect with compliance and regulatory considerations?
Oh, I mean, you can't have one without the other, is what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how can you say definitively that we are in compliance with OSHA guidelines and not have done an audit of your own, of the things you're supposed to be in compliance to?
Right.
And I think along these lines, like with the data ownership comes also like the ability to report on that. So I would say, even if you have the data, a lot of the times, like the regulatory bodies, right, or again, to be compliant, like you need to be able to hopefully quickly pull a report together of all of the data that you need for the information, right?
That's a great point. It's not that people are doing it without data. It's that owning your data allows for a quicker response to the questions and a quicker response to the filings, and a quicker response that's also coupled with a higher degree of certainty that what you are submitting is in fact accurate, rather than, okay, well, John over here pulled all of our specs from the 100 suppliers that we have, and then Mary's got to go through and check all of that against what we had, and then Tom over here has got to go and audit all that stuff. It's like, having that single source before you submit it to whoever, having a single source of truth that's connected with all these different vendors, then enables the Johns and the Marys and whoever else, one of them, to just pull the information and then submit it in for their compliance, assuming that the data is correct. That's The data
Right,
integrity has to be coupled with data ownership.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say there needs to be, right, like confidence in the data that you own. And then I think what we're more so talking about is like actually taking control over your data, right? Is like, how can we then, or again, empower, right? Your data strategy is like, how can we empower a business by having the data we need, accurate data that we need, and do things like reporting and others.
I know that there are companies out there that struggle with new product development projects because they can't find their data. So, and that's such a small piece of what the company actually does. So, in relation to compliance and regulatory and reporting and things like that that are coming in the next couple of years, really looking at a mountain of problems of sorting through data. And if we can't do that on one SKU, then it's going to be a problem for every component in the portfolio. So how can data ownership give companies a competitive advantage?
I think there's,
Go ahead.
I can take this one first. I think there's a number of advantages that data ownership comes with. I know we've talked a little bit about, sustainability, as well as, being quick, right, to report on the compliance pieces. I really do think like the R&D piece, right, Grace, that you just touched on is huge. I think when you have the data of what you've created in the past, as well as maybe access to data around trends, you're really able to look at like the two pieces, have some visibility into your kind of suppliers that you're using and the whole kind of story, and have kind of all the data you need to start doing some of those innovation.
I would give something that we haven't discussed yet, which is cost analysis and being able to quickly, run price comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many. And obviously, this is for established brands that are, buying annuity type packaging, but having good comprehensive data that is true, that you can quickly pull. And I would love to see a future state where even within Specright, where somebody can have sort of, I call it like the Carfax, like kind of like this is like the expected cost of what your current, and then it could show you like you're paying this, and expected price range is like here. It's like, oh, okay.
You haven't even seen my demo yet, Adam, and you already are talking about one of the slides.
No way. Okay. Well, then I will not steal your thunder, but being able to, quickly adjust not just to market trends, but also to market pricing, and having that be tied in with the Specright network, I think is a really big competitive advantage, because there are thousands of hours that are spent on asking and answering the question, how much does this cost? Like that is not an easy answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that owning your data makes that process condensed down, which gives you an ability to go to market faster, to gain, better margins when it comes, whether it's your ingredients or your packaging or whatever it is. Knowing what you're doing is going to be a competitive advantage beyond, just everything else. It also allows you to shift if you need to. So story time number 2. I used to buy packaging for a living, and there was a company that was killing everybody in pricing, just absolutely crushing everybody on folding cartons. And I was like, why are they so much cheaper? Most of my competitors, I was working for a broker, Peak Packaging Solutions, and distributor. Sorry, Uncle Bob. It's my uncle's company in Carlsbad, California. And they were killing everybody. And most of our competitors started sending all their stuff over to them. And I was like, my spidey sense was tingling, like, this doesn't seem right. And it turned out they were owning all the data, they were pulling it all in, and they weren't paying the paper suppliers. And so they took all of the die lines and all of the artwork, they ran a bunch of work for like a year, took a bunch of money, shut their doors, and left the country. And all of these companies were stuck because they had just sent it all out, because they chased after the cheap pricing. and now they had to move it. And boy, you're in trouble if you don't have your die lines saved, if you don't have your material saved, that's going to be a really tough thing to just move. And it happened like that.
And did you say that they were cheaper because they own their data?
They were not cheaper. They were cheaper because they were crooks. They were not paying their paper suppliers. So they were stealing money, and then they left a bunch of people on the hook. No, this was not a competitive advantage for that manufacturer.
So moral of the story, the brands that were giving this corrugate supplier business,
it was folding cartons.
Yeah. And now none of those brands have access to those die lines.
They did not have access to the information because they didn't, not all of them, but most of them couldn't move very fast. And so now it was like, oh shoot, now we got to go back and we got to look at, I mean, if you've got 25 different die lines that you got to go recreate now because you didn't do a good job saving them or whatever it is, you might miss a whole slew of stuff. So, and by the way, that pricing comparison somebody should have said, this is an outlier.
Yeah, like this is impossible. How did they? No, I know. I think, Matthew talks about this too, is like whether you're, dealing with a crook, I guess, or you're dealing with like impacts just to the world, right? Like if a region, something happens, right? Natural disasters, other pieces, right? Where your suppliers are, just to be able to act fast, especially if they are producing the, bulk of your folding cartons, for example. You do need to be able to like have that data to move that business elsewhere quickly. Definitely.
Yeah, it acts as like an insurance plan, right? That maybe you love your supplier, but they might get bought out and that plant gets shut down in 6 months. It happens way more often than people realize.
Yeah, for sure. What steps can companies take to ensure they effectively manage and protect their data assets?
I'll give a quick shout out here to the Spec Squad people. I think that's because so many people feel like, okay, this sounds great, right? Like nothing that we've said, companies are like, yeah, that sounds terrible. I don't want to do that, right? And I thought that it was actually really brilliant what they're doing with Spec Squad, where they take the onus of saying like, well, how do I go corral this beast that is all of my just packaging specs, let alone all of the other stuff? How do I go do all of this and also not make everybody mad? Because the minute you call your vendor, if you have had a relationship for a decade and they've been printing all of your, your shrink sleeves, your labels or whatever, and you call them and say, hey, I want all of my spec data, the initial thought is, oh my gosh, they're going to quote us out.
We're losing business.
And so what do? They slow play it. It's not accurate all the time. I'm not saying it's always like that, right? I mean, there are good partners who just go like, yeah, of course, it's your data, right? I mean, you should have it. But they also will make stuff up. There's plenty of vendors who are like, this is the new, whiz bang 62 material. And you're like, what is that? It's just a made up name that they made up.
Yeah.
So, starting with like, okay, we're going to do this, and knowing that there's a partner like Spec Squad who will go out and help you corral that as like a third party. And you can really paint the true story, which is with EPR, you can blame it on the government, right? Like, hey, we got all this EPR stuff. We have to be able to report on this. So we got to get all of our data. We're not going out to bid or anything like that. Of course, if you are, don't lie. But if you're not, then you can paint a good picture and then deploy some really awesome college students to go out and help you gather all of this stuff. I think is a tremendous first step to gather it. You can't manage and protect something that you haven't first gathered and brought in, right? And so you got to go out and get it first and bring it into to a single source of truth like Specright. How you manage and protect it, that's a question that I would leave up to to you two, because I don't know beyond that.
I mean, I think I think the gathering is such a huge part, and I think the shout out to Spec Squad is great. I think them taking that approach and reaching out to suppliers and, to your point, gathering the data because it's necessary. Like that's just the way that businesses are moving. Like suppliers need to share the data with the brand so that they can do this kind of reporting, especially for sustainability. But I think once you have it, it's also about maintaining it. So the demo, I guess, that I'm about to go into is around how suppliers can contribute and validate like the data that's within your system. We all know that specs don't stay at version 1 forever. Like there needs to be that change management process, and they should be part of that, where they can, validate or contribute to the data that's within the system, so that really, everyone is looking at the same spec. I think through this demo also, we'll talk about like permissions, which is maybe a way of how you could, protect your data, is making sure that those who need to have access to certain specs will get that access, but it's not necessarily like a free-for-all.
So Danielle, what does the future of supplier collaboration look like?
Yeah, so today I'm going to start with a demo around our current kind of supplier collaboration module at Specright. We'll touch on, how, again, suppliers can help and collaborate on kind of this real-time data to allow for everyone to view the same spec. After that, I'll go into a few slides around Specright Network, which is really, I think, the long-term vision at Specright around supplier collaboration, and really just more so treating kind of partners, whether you're a brand or a supplier or co-mans, all as equals in this ecosystem of sharing data. So if we can pull up my demo slide, perfect. So for the demo, I'm first starting in a Specright system that would be for a brand, for example. Here they can navigate to their specifications tab, where we can view an RSC, for example. So here they might have data, already inputted, but I noted here that, the material information as well as recycled content is missing. They, have a CAD file, but maybe we also want the artwork. So as part of the approval processes within Specright, you can see that this corrugated spec is in process, and I can go ahead and submit this spec for approval. You can add any comments that'll be traced in the approval process history area. And once you submit that spec, you'll see that it moves automatically depending approval. From there, if we go to the approval history tab, we're going to see kind of the automated steps that this spec is traveling through right now. So I submitted it as the first step, and it first moves to an internal manager at my company. So to bypass this, I'm just going to approve for Miss Mary. From there, we see it goes to Howard Jones in the supplier approval step. So the supplier will receive an email similar to this one, notifying them that the RSC spec within Specright is there for them to view and approve. So if they go ahead and click that link, they'll be brought directly into their own kind of portal. What's really important about these views is that this access is, controlled. They only get to see the fields and the data attributes down to the field level that the brand allows the supplier to see. They also obviously only get to see the specs where they are listed as the supplier, which you can see here. So that kind of, plays into the protecting or controlling the data that we talked to previously. Once they're in here and viewing the spec, as we scroll down, we can see some of that supplier information that was empty. So for example, I can go ahead and fill in some of the information where all of these fields are needed for TRIAC and our LCA integration. We also can add in some information for recycled content and how to recycle. So once we save that information, you'll see that all of the fields are updated. Again, in real time, all of this information is also changed on the brand system. They can also go ahead and add any files. So as we pointed out, a CAD was already in here. If this is an old drawing, you can delete and replace this. For this example, I'll just go ahead and add our logo as a pretend artwork file. So here you can see that I can also add in any files as a supplier, update the file type to an artwork, for example, and go ahead and save that. So again, here they're able to basically do any of the changes that you allow them to do. You also will see the history tracking going on. So this is where any field level change, file update, related list will be tracked, where you can see the old value, the new value, the timestamp. So whether a supplier is making the changes or someone internally, all of those updates will be tracked. So here we've, added some material information. It's not limited to that. They could be updating, the dimensions or other attributes, as well as we've added a file. So now as the supplier, I think this looks good to go. Under the approval history, you can see it's still pending for me. So I'm going to go ahead and give my final approval with the changes, made for the sustainability requirements and new artwork file. So once I give that approval, it's going to also alert the internal team, the ones that were involved in the two-step process of what changes were made. I am also, though, able to kind of draft my own message. You'll see here on the side, we have a collaboration tool called Chatter. You are able, maybe during the collaboration process or after, you're able to tag people similar to social media, where you can tag someone and say, like, please review, my changes here, or any other, maybe questions you have as you come to fill it out as a supplier, and you'll be able to share and post that. And what's great about the Chatter functionality is it allows you to tie all of your messages related to a specification within the system. So instead of doing all of the kind of back and forth email communication, this will kind of create that, message chain around the changes, and always be tied to this spec for reference for anyone in the system. And so that's kind of my quick demo on supplier collaboration within Specright. Today we did a RSC spec, but we do have this functionality built out for things like supplier documents and facility certifications, where people, the suppliers will get alerts when it's maybe 90 days out from their document expiration date, and they need to go back in and update those changes. You'll also see that on the homepage for suppliers, we built out training as well as an area for them to kind of see at a quick view what items they need to approve, as well as like reporting on them, their data as well, so they can see maybe how many specs are in status, kind of some of the sustainability information that they're kind of contributing to this brand's business. So taking a pause from that, I'm going to jump over to a few slides. As they mentioned, we are looking at launching Specright Network. The difference between Specright Network and the supplier portal or community that I just showed you is really the ability of who you can share data with. So the portal that I just showed you, an example would be that a customer of Specright buys external licenses for their suppliers to log into their system and contribute data. Those suppliers are logging directly into that portal, deemed a certain level of access, and really, contributing there or being part of approval processes. The Specright Network looks to really create an ecosystem where everyone is viewed as more so a member on this network, which allows for many-to-many sharing. And for those maybe on the call that are familiar with Specright's architecture, all of our data is really built in these many-to-many connections, which is going to allow kind of more companies to, either do business with others, view kind of specs again, or product catalogs that are of other members in the system. And here we're really just looking to, power collaboration between the brands, retailers, suppliers, co-mans, and take the best practices that we've learned from our supplier communities and having, customers on that side, or on that technology for years, and push this to, again, kind of the ecosystem where everyone can benefit from the, standardized templates of being able to, put out a corrugated template that everyone can share data on, and it can be, translated into their maybe own terms when they're looking to consume data, and really, enable that ecosystem of like-minded companies to come together and do business. Here you'll see we have, a few benefits of Specright Network. We will be looking to make this a marketplace where you can access, trusted suppliers. I think a big part of this when I talk with customers is they're very excited to, see who else gets brought on and look, who else has basically validated these suppliers to come and join and get matched, whether that's for needs around sustainability or maybe regions. We also, like I kind of mentioned already, are pushing kind of standardized templates around packaging, and we'll move into supplier docs and more types of data to really help everyone speak the same language around specs. We already have supplier documents available to start sharing with those expiration dates, and then similar levels of collaboration and even more advanced kind of version tracking than we do in our core system. The last piece that I want to touch on for today was actually what I called out Adam for in earlier, but we are looking at building an analytics tool, and we'll have some future webinars on this. It's called Corrugated Intelligence. We feel that we're in a position to help enable customers to really start looking at big data. We're kind of beta testing this with a small group of our customers right now, where we have over 10,000 corrugated specs in our analytics tool. And we're looking to do things like should cost modeling, like material and supplier intelligence, where you can really look at, like items between members and find common board grades by suppliers, and even better understand some standardized offerings by region. So this is going to be baked into Specright Network, and we'll look to grow the types of analytics that we do on the different tools. And that is my demo for today.
That's awesome. Grace is on mute and she's talking, but that's fine. Did you want me to wrap it up or?
Oh, no, I got it. I do have one last question for you, Alan.
Okay.
Why might you consider something like Specright Network?
Well, if you saw on the logo there, first of all, I just want to give a shout out to the people who are 42 minutes into this. You are the true superheroes. We in a world of attention deficiency, people who can, get through a webinar are really awesome. So I appreciate you. Yeah. So you saw the Myers logo on there. It's something that we are looking at pretty intensely at Myers. And a lot of that is because of the brands that you saw on the right side. So, we have a lot of consumers that are getting onto Specright. We're actually onboarding a customer right now who's like, yeah, all of our data is in Specright. And so I think the idea of a central source of truth is critical, not just for the brand, but also for the people who have to execute on what the data is in order to manufacture the thing. So, in our case, it's labels and folding cartons and RFID and stuff like that. So, if you have an RFID label spec that you need for the new Walmart initiative, and you have all of your specs in terms of what is it supposed to be, and that's all in a place like Specright. Well, let's say you update it, or if there's an update from our end because that material is no longer available. I think the ability to be able to just collaborate openly together as partners is really valuable to both us and the brand. And it does speak to that competitive advantage, I think, that could happen for a company like Myers, right? Where we would be able to go and help some of these brands who are maybe on Specright, but they're like, but our suppliers don't get it. They are not, they're scared of us owning our data, right? They don't really, they want to control our data. And so being there, just like Creed with arms wide open, being there to say like, no, we value this a lot, I think is going to help propel us where we want to get to, which is kind of the leading edge of two things. One, sustainability, which is a race that everyone's on, but two, being the easiest company to work with. And I think that something like Specright Network or Spec Network, what are we calling it? Is it Specright Network?
Network, yeah.
Specright Network, there it is. Being on something like Specright Network does enable a part of that journey of being really easy to work with. I use this example a lot. B2C buyers are also B2B buyers. And so when you look at the B2C market, it is incredibly easy to order whatever you want, whenever you want it on your phone. And that same buyer is going to have to buy labels and folding cartons and RFID. And their expectations are going to be, hey, this needs to be really easy and we need to be on the same page. And right now it's not. It's really hard. It is very, very difficult to buy packaging. And we want to be one of those companies that says, no, we want to be easy to do business with. And so I think it's going to be a huge competitive advantage for someone like Myers.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you speaking to Specright Network. It's pretty new to me. I think it's super awesome. And that's Danielle's expertise at Specright, obviously.
I think I said boldly when I first heard about it, I said, I think this will be the biggest part of Specright. Because there's a lot of brands, but there are I would guess that the amount of manufacturers of stuff, the ingredients, the co-mans, the contract, the corrugated suppliers, the ink, the labels, the shrink sleeves, the folding cartons, all of it, like that number probably is going to exceed, because the value is there, is going to exceed the amount of brands that are on. That's my bold prediction. Although I also thought the Denver Nuggets were going to beat the Minnesota Timberwolves, and that did not happen for me last night. So I'm still a little sad today.
I'll stick with your bold prediction. But no, I agree. I think that the value of Specright Network and almost so everyone in the supply chain taking control of their data, right? Whether it's suppliers, getting it ready for customers, or it's customers, owning the data and be able to report up to regulations or to their retailers and their customers. It's like everyone at the end of the day needs to take control of their data. And I think Specright Network will allow everyone to really look at the same set of data, kind of be on the same page around data, and to collaborate easier.
Listen, I mean, I'll kind of double down on my answer like this. So, I mean, people know, like, I've been able to be partnering with Specright now for a while through the People Packaging podcast. And I get approached by quite a few companies now about promoting and sponsoring the content I'm making because it's gotten a lot bigger. Mm-hmm. I choose to keep working with Specright because I really not just because it's like, the Lauras are great people. It's or that Matthew's a good person, which is true. But I genuinely believe, like thoroughly believe, that this solution is going to propel so many brands and so many suppliers out into the next phase of where we're going. If I didn't believe that, I would not be on this webinar. Promise you that. I've got other things to do. I would not be on this webinar. I wouldn't be promoting, because I'll have people like, like, oh, are you an employee for I'm like, I'm not an employee. I legitimately just think like, this is my authentic, I don't have a talk sheet here. This is me authentically sharing. Like, I spend a lot of time with brands. I spend a lot of time with packaging suppliers. And I firmly believe like this is a massive part of the future of where we're going.
Yeah.
And you guys have to say that because you get your paychecks, but I don't have to say that. I'm just saying it out of my own. No, I'm just kidding. You don't have to say that. But, I'm just saying that out of my own free will. I genuinely believe, like, in the network and the collaborations that you're coming up with, the partners that we've mentioned, you're collaborating with really great people outside of Avelio Matos. That guy. No, I'm just kidding. Avelio's great. We love him. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff going on.
Yeah, we think so too. That is it for us. It is time for our Q&A session. Please take this time to drop your questions in the chat if you have not done so already. And I do see a couple of questions. So Adam, Danielle, feel free to take it. I'm going to spit out the question and whoever wants to answer can answer. I think we touched on this one, but if you give your suppliers access, is there a way to limit the amount of fields they can see?
Yes, absolutely. You can do down to kind of field level permissions. So whether that's certain fields that you don't want them to see, files can have different libraries so they don't get to see. You really can control the data that they have access to.
You didn't want me to answer that one? I don't.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding.
There's one more question. What is the difference between specs living in documents versus Specright's digital form?
I can also take this one.
Yep, not for me.
Specs living in a document, right? It's basically just non-reportable, not searchable. So when you have a static file, we actually, when we onboard customers, plenty of customers come with static files. And another shout out to Spec Squad, they actually extract the data and load it into your Specright system. And what that happens, and when you were seeing me kind of demo, make changes to the fields or the attributes, right, on the page layouts, is all of that data is reportable and searchable. So our global kind of, we call it like a Google header almost, is like you can search for any keywords, and if it's in the specification, it's going to pull up that spec for you directly.
Yeah. I'm not seeing any more questions. So that was the last one that we have. But before we wrap up, I really just wanted to extend a huge thank you to Adam and Danielle for sharing your expertise with us today. Your contributions have truly opened my eyes to the importance of owning your data and the positive impact it can have on your business. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Adam, where can people follow you?
Well, I was joking beforehand. I can't find my MySpace page. So that's been shut down. I apologize to everybody. And I have not been on AOL Instant Messenger for a while. So I guess we can just, that was for the old people, those references. I guess we'll just stick with LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn. I post almost every day. I've been doing that for over a decade. Just search for my name, Adam Peak, on LinkedIn. If you want to get access to all the stuff I do, you can just go to packagingpastor.com, and that has links to everything. And I come up with really dumb random ideas like making t-shirts and writing kids books and selling.
You've been shaving your head on social media.
I've got yeah, I share cost shaving ideas.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. There's also a rugby player with my same name. We're different. We're two different people. I don't play rugby. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best. And, People of Packaging is the podcast that I host. Been doing that for almost 6 years. And myself and Avelio and then Corey Connors, who I think have both already done webinars. We host a show every Monday called Packaging Today on LinkedIn.
Which is a great show. Watch it every Monday morning.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you so much. I want to invite all of our attendees here today to join us on Tuesday, July 30th for the next webinar in the Specright Unpacked series. I will be joined by yet another special guest as we continue to dive into Specright and the value it brings to packaging teams, and not just packaging, but all different kinds of teams at brands. Stay tuned for a registration link coming soon. And if any additional questions come up or you're interested in diving deeper into the features mentioned today, please feel free to contact me directly at grace@specright.com. I would be happy to get you connected with a member of our team or provide any additional resources you might be looking for. We will be publishing the recording of this session in the coming days, so stay tuned for that if you'd like to look back or share these resources with your team. Thanks again for joining us today, and we hope to see you in July.
Thanks.
Bye.